pictures that were much better organized and written. That one with all the confusion and...
With this startling admission in her memoir, Ingrid Bergman, one of cinema's most luminous icons, offered the world a glimpse into a private life that had long been shrouded in mystery. Was it a coded confession of a hidden romance? Or perhaps a moment of candor from a woman who had lived under the unrelenting spotlight of fame? Whatever the truth may be, the words themselves became yet another fascinating layer in the portrait of an actress who never ceased to intrigue. To understand their weight, we must journey back through the remarkable life of a woman who transformed loss into strength, and who carved her name into the very foundations of film history. Ingrid Bergman was born in 1915 in Stockholm, Sweden, into a world that, at first, seemed tender and secure. But the stability of her childhood was fleeting. She lost her mother when she was only 3, and by the age of 12, her father, her greatest supporter, was also gone. Orphaned at such a fragile age, Bergman could easily have faded into obscurity, her life overshadowed by grief. Yet destiny seemed to chart a different course. For Ingrid, the stage became both refuge and sanctuary. Where others saw only darkness, she discovered the power of light, literally and metaphorically. Her fascination with performance blossomed into a calling, and she soon entered Stockholm's prestigious Royal Dramatic Theatre School. There, her natural poise, unadorned beauty, and ability to dissolve into character caught immediate attention. In an era when glamour often meant heavy makeup and carefully sculpted personas, Bergman stood out by embracing authenticity. She seemed to embody the audience's reflection, real, flawed, luminous in her humanity. Her breakthrough came in 1936 with the Swedish film Intermezzo, a romantic drama that showcased her raw emotion and disarming charm. The performance captivated not only Scandinavian audiences, but also the discerning eyes of Hollywood producers. When Ingrid Bergman set foot in America, it was clear she was unlike any actress Hollywood had seen before. The studios of the 1940s were filled with glamorous stars, carefully sculpted into icons by publicity machines. Yet, Bergman's magnetism lay not in heavy artifice, but in her radiant simplicity. She was luminous without trying to be, a natural beauty whose presence captivated audiences long before she spoke her first line. More importantly, her acting style was strikingly genuine. Where others performed with grand flourishes, Bergman chose honesty. She inhabited her characters so completely that audiences felt they were watching real people rather than screen illusions. Her breakthrough in Hollywood came with Casablanca, 1942. Cast opposite Humphrey Bogart, she portrayed Ilsa Lund, a woman torn between love and duty, caught in the swirl of war and memory. The film was modestly expected to do well, but no one predicted it would become a cultural phenomenon, nor that it would cement Bergman's name into cinematic history forever. The chemistry between Bogart and Bergman was electric, unforced, poignant, and unforgettable. To this day, the sight of Bergman's luminous eyes, framed by shadow and longing, remains one of cinema's most enduring images. Following Casablanca, Bergman's ascent was unstoppable. Just 2 years later, she delivered a performance so haunting in Gaslight, 1944, that she earned her first Academy Award. As Paula Alquist, a young woman manipulated into questioning her own sanity by a deceitful husband, Bergman revealed not just vulnerability, but an inner strength that slowly rose to the surface. Critics hailed her work as transformative, proof that she was not just a star, but a serious actress of extraordinary depth. The late 1940s were a parade of triumphs. Alfred Hitchcock, ever the master of suspense, found in Bergman the perfect muse. Their collaborations, Spellbound, 1945, Notorious, 1946, and Under Capricorn, 1949, showcased her versatility and deep emotional range. In Notorious, she played Alicia Huberman, a woman torn between love and espionage, caught in a perilous game with Cary Grant's stoic agent. The film not only gave her one of the most challenging roles of her career, but also delivered one of cinema's most famous kisses. 3 minutes of restrained passion filmed under the strict rules of the production code. It was daring, elegant, and unforgettable, just like Bergman herself. What set Bergman apart during this golden era was her ability to embody women who were far more complex than the archetypes of the time. While many of her contemporaries were typecast as either the femme fatale or the virtuous ingénue, Bergman carved out a space for layered portrayals. She was tender yet resilient, vulnerable yet commanding. She could play queens and ordinary women with equal conviction, lending each role the weight of truth. Her personal charisma was equally compelling. Off-screen, she exuded the same warmth and authenticity that defined her performances. Co-stars frequently recalled her kindness and humility, rare qualities in a business often fueled by ego. Directors admired her discipline and relentless pursuit of honesty in every role. Hitchcock himself noted that Bergman had the ability to project more than she knew, a quality that made her performances endlessly fascinating to watch. By the late 1940s, Ingrid Bergman was more than just a star. She was a symbol of integrity in acting, a woman who commanded both critical respect and box office success. She appeared on magazine covers, was celebrated as one of the most beautiful women in the world, and became the international face of cinema at a time when Hollywood was at the height of its global influence. Yet fame, as history often reminds us, is rarely without its shadows. Even as Bergman basked in the glow of her triumphs, the seeds of controversy were beginning to take root. Her decision to pursue creative risks, her passion for authentic human connection, and her refusal to live within the boundaries of Hollywood's carefully scripted morality would soon test the very foundations of her stardom. But in those luminous years, the era of Casablanca, Gaslight, and Notorious, Ingrid Bergman stood at the peak of her powers. She was adored by millions, admired by her peers, and regarded as one of the finest actresses of her generation. The golden era was not just a chapter in her career, it was the period that defined her legacy, ensuring that her name would forever be inscribed among the giants of the 20th century cinema. Behind the dazzling lights of Hollywood, Ingrid Bergman's life was anything but simple. For all her success, she remained a woman in search of both love and truth, two forces that would bring her moments of great joy, but also great turmoil. In 1937, Bergman married Swedish neurosurgeon Petter Lindström. By outward appearances, their union was solid, a picture of respectability that suited Hollywood's expectations of its stars. Together, they had a daughter, Pia, born in 1938. But even in these early years, cracks began to show. Lindström's world was rooted in science and stability, while Bergman's belonged to art, performance, and restless ambition. As her fame soared, the distance between their lives widened. Then came Roberto Rossellini. The Italian filmmaker, a pioneer of neorealism, had stunned the world with his groundbreaking work, Rome, Open City, 1945. For Bergman, Rossellini represented everything Hollywood was not. Raw, experimental, unpolished, and deeply human. In 1949, after watching one of his films, she impulsively wrote him a letter, expressing her admiration and her desire to work together. Few could have predicted that this letter would ignite one of the most infamous scandals in the history of cinema. Their professional collaboration quickly turned into a passionate affair. The problem was, Bergman was still married. When news broke that she was pregnant with Rossellini's child, the backlash was swift and merciless. In an era when stars were expected to embody virtue as well as glamour, Bergman's actions were considered nothing short of betrayal. American newspapers denounced her. Headlines screamed of immorality. Churches condemned her from the pulpit. In perhaps the most shocking moment of all, a U.S. senator stood on the Senate floor and declared her a powerful influence for evil, arguing that her very presence on American screens corrupted public morals. Hollywood, ever conscious of its image, turned its back. Studios cut ties, projects vanished, and Bergman, once the golden girl of the silver screen, was suddenly an outcast. But Bergman was not one to collapse under scandal. She gave birth to her son Renato in 1950 and soon married Rossellini. Together they had twin daughters, Isabella and Isotta, born in 1952. The marriage was tempestuous, marked by creative clashes and personal struggles, but it also produced some of Bergman's most daring work. Films like Stromboli, 1950, and Journey to Italy, 1954, were bold departures from Hollywood convention, deeply introspective explorations of human relationships. Though not commercial successes at the time, they would later be recognized as groundbreaking pieces of cinema. Still, the personal cost was high. By 1957, the Bergman-Rossellini marriage had unraveled, leading to divorce. A year later, Bergman married Swedish theatrical producer Lars Schmidt, a union that would last nearly 2 decades. With Schmidt, she found a measure of stability, though her heart remained restless, forever pulled between her dedication to family and her insatiable love for the craft of acting. Despite the scandal, Bergman never let controversy define her. In 1956, she mounted one of the greatest comebacks in entertainment history. Returning to Hollywood after years in exile, she starred in Anastasia, a sweeping historical drama about a woman who may, or may not, be the lost Russian princess. The performance was luminous, nuanced, and triumphant. Audiences welcomed her back with open arms, and the Academy crowned her with her second Oscar. It was as if the world had been reminded that artistry, when genuine, could outshine even the harshest judgment. From that point forward, Bergman's reputation was unstoppable. She continued to dazzle across film, television, and stage, winning her third Oscar for Murder on the Orient Express, 1974. 2 Emmy Awards for television performances, and a Tony Award for her stage work in Joan of Lorraine. Few performers in history have managed to dominate across so many mediums, and Bergman did so with grace, determination, and an almost stubborn devotion to truth. When Ingrid Bergman's memoirs were published, readers expected tales of cinema, triumph, and the familiar rise-fall-return arc of a Hollywood legend. What they did not expect was a single phrase, short, startling, and dripping with mystery, that would send film historians and gossip columnists alike into a frenzy. He was enormous. The words appeared in a passage where Bergman reflected on Gregory Peck, one of the towering male stars of mid-century Hollywood. To some, it seemed a playful remark about his physical stature. Peck, after all, was over 6 feet tall, with the broad shoulders and statuesque presence of a leading man. But for those who knew Bergman, an actress who chose her words carefully, who rarely indulged in flattery, the comment carried weight far beyond mere description. In the memoir, she elaborated, Peck was not simply a colleague, not merely another name among her constellation of co-stars. He was, in her eyes, a man of immense integrity, deeply magnetic, and someone whose quiet moral force left a profound mark on her. Bergman, who had lived through the storms of scandal and exile, found in Peck a kind of anchor, a reminder that amidst Hollywood's artifice, true decency still existed. But what lay beneath those words? Was there perhaps an intimacy never revealed to the public? The speculation is tantalizing. They worked together on Spellbound, 1945, Alfred Hitchcock's psychological thriller where Bergman played a psychoanalyst unraveling the mysteries of Peck's troubled character. On screen, their chemistry was palpable, her piercing sincerity against his brooding vulnerability. Off-screen, accounts from crew members suggest a closeness that went beyond professional respect. They would linger after takes, deep in conversation, laughter occasionally breaking through Hitchcock's famously tense sets. Some whispered of a shared tenderness, subtle but unmistakable. One assistant later recalled catching a fleeting moment between them, a hand resting a second too long on a shoulder, a look that seemed to carry volumes of unspoken words. Nothing was ever confirmed, of course, but in Hollywood's corridors, silence often spoke louder than declarations. Bergman herself remained discreet, never painting explicit details. Yet her memoir hints at a connection that shaped her in ways that even Rossellini, with all his artistic fervor, could not. She described Peck as a man who walked with dignity even in the storm, a phrase many believe mirrored her own longing for stability during the chaos of her personal life. Was it admiration, a passing infatuation, or a deep unfulfilled love? The truth lies somewhere in the shadows between fact and rumor. Suppose for a moment that Bergman and Peck had pursued their bond beyond friendship. The pairing of two of cinema's greatest figures, both admired not only for their artistry but for the moral gravitas they projected, could have altered the course of Hollywood mythology. Imagine them as a power couple, reshaping the industry's perception of romance and resilience, perhaps even redefining the balance between scandal and virtue in the public eye. Would Bergman's exile have been softened by Peck's unshakable reputation? Would Peck, forever remembered as Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, have carried a different aura had his life intertwined with Bergman's in love as well as in film? Yet, perhaps the power of their story lies precisely in what remained unsaid. The restraint, the ambiguity, the possibility that theirs was a love that lived only in stolen glances and private conversations makes the memory even more potent. Bergman, who had dared to live boldly and suffered the consequences, seemed in this case to choose silence. And in that silence, she left behind one of the great unsolved mysteries of celebrity history. Gregory Peck himself, ever dignified, never addressed the speculation. Known for his reserved nature, he carried himself with a kind of old-world honor that resisted gossip. But those who knew him well spoke of a fondness for Bergman that endured throughout his life. At tributes and gatherings, his eyes would light up when her name was mentioned. To some, this was confirmation enough. In the end, "He was enormous" was not just a comment on physicality. It was a glimpse into Bergman's private heart, a coded acknowledgement of a man who stood larger than life in her memory, not simply for his stature, but for his character, his presence, his influence. Perhaps in those 3 words, she revealed more than an entire chapter could have conveyed. For a woman whose life was shaped by both passion and restraint, by scandal and redemption, the confession is perfectly fitting. It leaves us with more questions than answers, drawing us deeper into the enigma of Ingrid Bergman. Was it love unrealized? Friendship elevated to something sacred? Or simply admiration, magnified by years of reflection? We will never know for certain, but that is precisely why the line endures. Because just as Bergman's performances invited us to look beyond the surface, to search for the human truths hidden within, her words about Gregory Peck invite us to wonder, to imagine, to dream of the stories that flickered just out of sight. By the mid-1970s, Ingrid Bergman had already lived several lifetimes in one. She had known adoration and exile, scandal and redemption. She had been crowned with Oscars, denounced from political pulpits, and celebrated once more as the grand dame of the screen. Yet life, never content to grant her peace, presented its final and most relentless adversary: illness. In 1974, Bergman received the diagnosis: breast cancer. For many, such a revelation might have meant retreat, silence, and resignation. But Bergman was never one to bow quietly to circumstance. Even as she endured surgeries, treatments, and the exhausting cycles of remission and relapse, she refused to step away from her craft. Acting was not merely her profession. It was her lifeblood. And so, she pressed on. In 1978, she collaborated with legendary director Ingmar Bergman, no relation, in what would become one of the most harrowing and celebrated performances of her career: Autumn Sonata. Playing Charlotte, a celebrated pianist whose relationship with her daughter is marred by distance and regret, Ingrid poured into the role not only her immense skill, but also her own lived experience. The guilt of absences, the ache of choices made, the fragility of maternal bonds stretched by ambition. The performance was haunting, raw, and deeply personal. Critics called it one of the finest works of her life, as though she had distilled all her years of triumph and pain into a single role. But Bergman's story did not end there. Against medical advice, she accepted the challenge of portraying Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir in the television miniseries A Woman Called Golda, 1981. The physical transformation was extraordinary. Padded suits, heavy makeup, and a shaved hairline to capture Meir's likeness. Yet beneath the surface, what captivated audiences was the sheer force of Bergman's spirit. Despite her frail health, her body already weakened by cancer spreading to her lymph nodes and beyond, she delivered a performance of iron resolve. She won an Emmy and a Golden Globe posthumously for the role as though the world once again wished to crown her courage. Her final months were a study in resilience. Friends recall how, even as her body betrayed her, she remained radiant in conversation, witty in her observations, and endlessly curious about the world. She continued to write letters, sketch character ideas, and even spoke of future projects she dreamed of undertaking should her health allow. Some speculate she had planned a memoir sequel, one that would reveal more candidly the truth she had left unsaid. The Gregory Peck confession, the complexities of her marriage to Rossellini, the unvarnished doubts of her final years. If such notes existed, they remain hidden, perhaps destroyed, leaving us only to imagine what revelations they might have contained. On August 29, 1982, her 67th birthday, Ingrid Bergman took her final breath in London. It was as though life itself had scripted the perfect symmetry. She departed the world on the very day she had entered it, closing the circle with poetic finality. Her funeral became a global event. Artists, dignitaries, and fans from every corner of the world gathered to honor her. Gregory Peck, visibly moved, was said to have whispered during the service. She was immense, echoing her own words from years earlier, a quiet tribute that blurred the line between public eulogy and private memory. Her ashes were divided, part interred in Stockholm, her homeland, and part scattered at sea near the Swedish coast. It was a fitting farewell for a woman whose life had been lived in fragments, between countries, between loves, between triumphs and trials, yet always with authenticity. Ingrid Bergman's life, in many ways, reads like the script of a grand epic. A girl orphaned too soon, who rose to the heights of Hollywood, fell to the depths of scandal, and fought her way back to stand taller than ever before. She was luminous, vulnerable, and endlessly resilient. A woman who seemed to belong as much to legend as to history. And yet, even in the final chapters of her life, she refused to let the world have the last word. With that tantalizing confession in her memoir, "He was enormous," Bergman left us with one more mystery. Was it simply admiration for Gregory Peck's towering stature and integrity? Or was it a veiled hint at a love story hidden between the lines of history, a passion that flickered just beyond the reach of the cameras? Imagine for a moment a different timeline. Ingrid Bergman and Gregory Peck, not just co-stars in Hitchcock's Spellbound, but lifelong companions. Two giants of cinema united, reshaping Hollywood's golden age with their combined grace and gravitas. Perhaps their union might have softened the sting of her scandal, or perhaps it would have created an even greater storm. Two untouchable idols daring to live freely, at a time when society demanded silence and conformity. We may never know the truth. Perhaps that is precisely why her words linger so powerfully. They invite us into the delicious uncertainty of what might have been, reminding us that even icons are human, filled with secrets, desires, and choices that defy easy explanation. Ingrid Bergman's legacy is not just her 3 Oscars, her Emmys, or her timeless films. It is the reminder that to live greatly is to live authentically, without apology, even when the world resists. She dared to risk everything for love, for art, for truth, and in doing so, she became immortal. Now, we turn the question over to you. What do you believe? Was Bergman's confession a fleeting remark, or the trace of a hidden romance with Gregory Peck that the world was never meant to see? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this enduring mystery. And if you enjoyed uncovering the secrets of Ingrid Bergman's extraordinary life, don't forget to hit like, share this video with friends who love old Hollywood, and subscribe to our channel. We'll continue to bring you the untold stories, the scandals, and the legends that shape the stars we still admire today. Because in the end, the magic of cinema is not just what we see on screen. It's the lives, loves, and mysteries that lie behind it. And few embodied that magic more completely than Ingrid Bergman.